Good afternoon. I am Kim Seungwan from Chungnam National University. The main theme of today's conference is electricity security. And so from the perspectives of the power market, what we need to do, I think this is the main theme that passes through today's conference. When we talk about electricity security, the first thing that comes to our mind is the securing the supply of resources such as the coal, gas, and oil, or renewable energies and equipment, and also the lithium ion for battery. So I think that we think about the supply chain issues. And also we may think about the market aspect. So how can we stabilize the markets to provide the energy at affordable price? Again, this is within the realm of the electricity security. But I think that when we talk about the energy security or electricity security, one thing that we can easily overlook is the greed issues. In fact, Korea has come up with a lot of policies, and the greed was something that followed the network plan. And it was not really the government plan, rather the greed was planned only by individual company. Why? Because we thought that the grid will naturally expand with the changes of the power mix. However, if you look at the rapid changes, the current rapid changes that take place in the energy mix, and also with the various sources of energy, I think that assumption is no longer valid. And therefore, we really have to go back to basics. And we have to think about how grid can support and be reinforced to support the current or future power mix, and what kind of innovation will be required to secure long-term electricity security. So this will be the main theme of my presentation. So this is what I'm going to talk about. These are the key takeaway messages. So grid is the crucial component to ensure long-term electricity security. And this is something that we may have to prioritize. So we talk about the supply and demand balance plan. However, only with the supply and demand, we can no longer guarantee the actual balance. Only with the generation expansion plan, we cannot guarantee supply and demand balance. Because we can expand the power plant, however, the question is whether it can be interconnected with the grid. In the past, there was no problem for that, but today we have a lot of constraints. And the issues of the grid and the problems are not just limited to the VREs or renewable energy. Rather, they are applicable even to the coal power plants and nuclear power plants and so on. So it's a common problem for every generation, not just for renewables. So when we said that we want to pursue the renewable energy mix, and we want to diversify the sources of energy, but if the grid cannot accommodate these resources, then we will not be able to achieve our goal. So we have to think outside the box, and we have to come up with the innovative solution. And in fact, there are a lot of innovative solutions already available in the grid system. Many researchers and also industries have conducted a lot of researches for that. About 3 to 5 years ago, these technologies and concepts exist only in paper. But then this year, we see a lot of pilot projects being conducted as well as the commercialization opportunities. So I would like to briefly explain you about this and where we should go for a better energy security in the future. Here you can see the current status of the Korea power system. I don't know whether it's readable, it's a little bit small. But here you see the dotted red line. It indicates the maximum energy demand for each region. And the bar graph shows the capacity of different power sources. And you can see that if you look at the Seoul and metropolitan area, they have some power plants. But if you just focus on Seoul, you can see that there is almost no power generation facility, whereas the electricity demand is very high. So here you can see that there is an uneven distribution of the generation. Most of the gas power plants, they are located in Incheon, area and nuclear power plant, which are green. I didn't intentionally choose green for nuclear power, just random. Anyway, they are located in the eastern part of Korea, so Daegu and Gyeongbuk area. And also the coal-fired power plant are concentrated in the Chungnam area. And if you look at the PV, you see that they are heavily located in the Jeonbuk and Jeonnam provinces. So the generation is unevenly distributed, and not just that, the demand gap also increases by regions. So in year 2034, according to the government plan, if you look at the generation and load map, and let's take a look at Seoul area, so the demand will even go up. And however, the power generation capacity within Seoul is not increased. What about Jeonnam? You can see that they have a high installed capacity for renewable energy, but demand is not that high. So a lot of energy will be wasted. So this imbalance between the generation and demand will become more and more serious. And this is the future that we will face if we don't take any actions. Let's just take a look at one single region. This is the Donghaean, or the eastern coast of Korea. And so there is a power generation belt there. So here you can see that the Samcheok, firepower, green energy, nuclear power. So there are a lot of power plants in this power plant. And you can see that all these transmission are concentrated in the Sintebek area, and they are linked with the Seoul. So when I do the simulation with the grid, when there is no constraint on transmission, then the generation can be highly utilized. However, if you think about the constraint on the transmission network here, you cannot really have a full capacity factor for the power generation facilities. And also there are a lot of technical issues such as the frequencies instability and also transient instability. And the same problem will occur not just in the west, but also in the west coast area as well. So if you go to the Chungnam province with the coal phase out, yes, there are some headrooms, but still we have the constraints for transmission network. So here you can see that we talk about a lot about expanding the base sources, but again, there is a limitation on location, so it should be near the coast, and also there should be the public buy-in to establish the power plant and expand the power generation facilities. So if you do not reinforce the transmission grid, if you just expand the power generation facilities, I don't think that this is a wise choice. And if you look at the demand side, you can see that the population continuously grow in the Seoul area, and therefore the energy demand also go up accordingly. And also, if you look at the Korea's industrial structure, you see that the semiconductor is very strong in Korea. And semiconductor facilities are located in the metropolitan area, including the Yongin and Cheonan. And the government is trying to establish the K semiconductor belt in the metropolitan area, which will boost up the energy demand significantly. However, if you look at the capacity of the power generation in this area, they only have the coal generation power plant. And because of the high land price, the renewable energy facilities are not located here. And also we have a lot of data centers. And data center guzzles the energies and creates a lot of energy demand. And they are not really properly reflected in the government plan. And also they have the massive load, they cause massive load on the grid system. And therefore, if this situation continues, then what kind of solutions we should have? And also we have to think about whether the ninth transmission plan is properly made. And so for this, I did some simulation, as you can see. And later, I did another simulation with the different batch, so I'm going to elaborate that later on. And here you can see the grid planning based on the optimal expansion planning. So if you look at the transmission and also substation, you can see the red line here. So from the southern part to the northern part, and also the transmission line that connects the Gangwon and Chungbuk, and also the Seoul, these transmission lines have to be reinforced according to the modeling report. However, because of the constraint that I described earlier, the expansion cannot be made easily, so the problems will continue to aggravate. Why? Because, as I said earlier, the energy demand will continue to go up in the Seoul and metropolitan area, whereas the power generation will continue to be concentrated only in certain areas. And also when it comes to VRE, including PV, you can see that by localities, the utilization ratio is different. But as for the PV, we have the rooftop installed PV and other types of PV, so still we have some choices. But for wind power, you can see that only the Seongnam area has the strong potential. But this is just for the fixed bottom. But when it comes to floating offshore wind, again, the potential is concentrated only in the deep sea of the Seongnam area. In other words, the concentration of the power generation, this is something that we cannot avoid because of some geographic characteristics of the Korean peninsula. And therefore, unless we really think outside the box, we cannot find the breakthrough to address this issue. However, if you look at the 9th transmission and substation plan, or 10th transmission and substation plan, you may think that if we just comply with that, then things will go away. But it is easier said than done. Recently, I conducted the research with the local government regarding the resident buy-in. And here you can see the survey question that we conducted to the resident. And the first question is transmission line construction, whether it's a social problem or technical problem. And more than half of the respondents said that it's a social issue. And the second question was if the transmission line passes our region, then it will cause a problem in our local community. And more than 50% of the respondents said yes. And also the majority of the respondents believe that this is a serious issue. And also from engineers' perspective, if you measured the electromagnetic wave from the transmission line, in fact, it's much lower than the level that could affect the health of the human beings. However, the many residents believe that the transmission line is very dangerous. And what's more interesting, here you see that the majority of the respondents said that the transmission line could affect the price of house and land. Many said that they strongly agree with this. And we also asked the question whether they are willing to pay additional tariff for undergrounding transmission facilities. And the majority of the respondents said no, they don't want. So this indicates that there are a lot of barriers for us to reinforce the transmission lines to balance the demand and supply of energy. So yes, the transmission reinforcement is important, but we also have to find out some alternatives because currently many of these solutions are not that feasible. So we have to come up with some alternative solutions. And as the grid innovation plan shows that there is some inevitable delay that because of the gap for the timing of the establishing the transmission plan and the dispatch plan. And So maybe we can switch the order and we can come up with a transmission plan first, followed by the generation plan. And also the power companies, they should avoid the risk of expanding transmission line. So for this, we have to give them some confidence as well. But I think that there is a very interesting project in Europe. So this is E-Highway 2050 project, and in fact, they use the probabilistic approach. In other words, they expect how much energy demand will go up, and also how much VRE demand will be created, and also where the new communities or the bed towns are going to be located. So they analyze all these different kind of scenarios, and also and then they select some priorities, and for these priority areas, what they say is that they can establish transmission line first there. So they run 5 scenarios to come up with the plans for grid, and if there is a high redundancy among the scenarios, then this is the area where transmission demand will be significantly high. So this is the area where we can focus on when establishing transmission line, and this is something that we can learn. Next is about the decentralization of generation and load. And recently, while conducting research, I realized that, well, actually, I thought that decentralization is a great solution, but I actually ran the 10,000 scenarios for decentralization in Korea randomly. So I did the 10,000 simulations through the program, and I found that the distribution, according to the ninth energy balance plan, in fact, they actually have very good solutions with high probabilities. But if we want to move further and advance further, then we didn't really have a lot of choices. But there are several scenarios that we can apply. For example, like we should no longer establish the VR facilities in Chungnam area and establish more renewable energy facilities in the metropolitan area. And so although we come up with some innovative solutions with this modeling and simulation, these will not be the major solutions because already we have deployed all good solutions. And also, even if we do the decentralization, we have to think about how we can do it. The US uses the LMP methodology. So they deliver the price signals so that the operators can reflect them in their long-term plan. However, when it comes to Korea, there is a gap on land prices, and this will lead to changes in the LCOE. And when it comes to the Seoul area, there is more than 1,001 difference, and Chungnam area 151, and other local governments about 201 difference. I don't know whether all the land prices are reflected in this data, but this data shows that, in fact, we may have to pay higher to deliver the proper price signals to overcome the regional disparity. And so we have to think about the social acceptance issue as well. So in Korea, rather than trying to have the perfect mechanism, I think that the government intervention is critical. For example, like applying some incentives for RAC, I think this could be more effective in the short term. And the third solution that I would like to suggest, I think this is the most innovative one. And this has existed only in papers, but recently the UK, they came up with the Eastern Green Link 2 project. It was approved recently by the UK government. And this project is to link the Scotland, where a lot of the power generations are made, to the Eastern England part. So for this, the subsea superhighway will be established. The similar attempts were tried in Korea, called the Seohean Highway project. is because in order to avoid the conflict with the local residents, they try to use the floating offshore wind power. So because of the conflict with the local residents, they can no longer establish the onshore wind power facilities. And therefore, they establish a lot of offshore wind power facilities and link them to the land area through the subsea superhighway. So I think that this case actually gives Korea a lot of learning points. And when it comes to the grid strength or system strength, we are not really ready. So how can we solve this problem? Maybe we can provide a direct link with the area with a strong system. And also based on the complex system theory, the Professor Kim Hee-tae conducted research on the complex system theory, and they said that there are several methods. So, for example, like for the there is a grid shortcut methodology and also the long detour methodology, and you can see that the grid shortcut is much more stable than the other one. So, according to our assessment. And this is the concept of the West Coast DC highway, and this is one of the case for the grid shortcut solution. Of course, we still have a long way to go to realize this solution because the HCVC is very expensive right now. And also HCVC often experiences the shutdown and also the braking. But so we have to find out the solutions. So we cannot implement these solutions right now, but I think we have to make some preparation. And also we can think about the non-wire alternative. And about 2 to 3 years ago, again, these existed only in paper, but recently we moved on to the commercialization phase. A key example is the South Australia Murray Link 2.0 project. So in the renewable energy complex, let's say that the generation capacity is the 275 watt, but the demand is only 200 megawatt. So usually the 75 megawatt were curtailed because of the lack of demand. But let's say that you install the batteries on the supply side and you store the excess 75 megawatts in the storage, and then later transmit the power to the area where the energy is needed. So in the case, this virtual power line can allow large-scale integration without grid congestion, and it can also create the effect of reinforcing transmission line. And if you try to establish the transmission line, usually it takes 5 to 10 years. But ESS, only after the pre-feasibility study, you can complete the construction only in 1 to 2 years. So in terms of time-wise, it's very, very efficient. And also the firming ESS that the Korean government recently adopted. In early phases, again, our plan is to utilize these ESS. So in the sense, I think this alternative solution has been partially realized in Korea as well. So this is the conclusion of my presentation. As I said earlier, grid is the crucial component to ensure long-term electricity security. And therefore, this is something that we should not overlook. And only with the generation expansion plan, we cannot guarantee the supply and demand balance. And these problems are not just for renewables, but for every generation, every power generation. But we have a lot of innovative solutions, and a lot of researches have been conducted already. And so we have several solutions that are viable today, and maybe we can come up with a portfolio to utilize these innovative solutions in order to ensure long-term electricity security. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.